Thanks everyone for making the time. And this is a session I've actually wanted to have for a while. Avram and I were having a conversation about how building a company is one of the challenges of that is how you need to find people who will take responsibility, people who will take ownership. And in a team, a lot of times, a lot of work ends up being done by the founders or the early team. And this is a conversation Valentin and I've had for years in terms of how people who change status quo tend to be people who take initiative and come out and make decisions and take the responsibility for their decisions. So the reason we thought that we should have this conversation now is and invite Valentin and of course Shahrukh was because given the current situation where people are starting to come back to work, people are deciding, should we be going to an office and working together? Should we work online? Also, the freedom to be able to work anywhere in the world creates businesses like Valentin's businesses, but at the same time creates a lot of challenges in terms of keeping newer members of the team motivated, but also having them develop a corporate culture or a mindset where they believe they are being heard and that they can take ownership and they can take risks. Because when you don't meet the person physically, you're not able to interact with them. There's no mentorship or apprenticeship as it used to be back in the day. How do you make sure that people are still able to contribute to their best? And this applies actually across the board within families, within corporates. The reason we asked Shahrukh and Valentin, I'll ask them to make a quick introduction, if that's okay, to themselves, is because Shahrukh has many, many years of experience, both on the talent development side. I mean, certainly he helps me develop my management skills and leadership skills a lot, and also on helping boards and companies grow. And Valentin, in addition to Valentin and I having worked together very closely as we were building out the new strategy for August 1, I've had a chance to sort of learn a lot from Valentin over the last couple of years in terms of how he's an athlete, so how he's developed his style of working. And we've been able to develop some ideas together as well in terms of how when we take in new people who are just online, or team members who might not have the same motivation levels as we would expect them to, how to get them to a point where they can be key members of our team. Shahrukh, I'll hand it to you.
Good to be here, everyone. So just a very quick introduction. So I've spent many years in living in 6 countries and 10 or 11 top global companies, family companies. And my last 2 sort of big jobs was with Nokia as the HR VP for Asia Pacific and China, where I lived 3 years in Beijing as well. I'm Singaporean, based out of Singapore. And then I joined Shell, the last 9+ years of my corporate full-time career. And 2 major jobs. One was as the HR VP for Asia Pacific and Middle East, which was like 25,000 employees, 30% of revenues, CapEx, and so on. And then I suppose to crown off my career, I was asked to do a global job of $100 billion vertical, which would have been a Fortune 50 company by itself if we were to carve ourselves out of the big shell. And did that global CHRO role for 7+ years. And then you sort of wonder why you're always on a plane and late night calls and your purpose comes to life. And that's when I decided that I wanted to do more with my life, which was really helping people, helping small companies to develop to be the best they can be. So that's what I've been endeavoring to do. Took some big risks in my life, and I have to say that I'm very pleased that I took those ventures and risks and moved countries and family, 6 countries, and have had no regrets to look back on, except that there's still a lot to do in this whole business. So thanks for that.
Amazing. Thanks, Shahrukh. No, good to see some familiar faces as well still here and following the PXL August 1 workshops. So that's always good to see that. Thanks a lot for having me. So as Samir also mentioned, I previously worked with PXL in August 1 and was part of the small team that tried to build big things. So we had to have linchpin mentalities and very much with the execution in mind and how we can build things as efficiently as possible. And for the past 8-9 months, I've been working on my own venture now, trying to create space by sharing space. So providing access to underused space for everyone, for work as well, so remote working, for corporate events, for also media production. So now with what we call the rise of the creators economy, people create content to have access to new locations, to have photo shoots or video shoots. And on the side of that, been running a few small projects that I love around working remotely. Also, as Samir mentioned, been into sports for a long time now. Had a few plans, as I was telling before, had recently a small bike crash. Also comes with it, so you have to also learn from that. And a lot of it is applicable to the world of entrepreneurship, actually. And the more you do that, the more you realize it's very, very similar at the end of the day. Yeah, very excited to share my perspective and point of view and from my experiences as well on the topic we're approaching today.
Thank you, Shahrukh, and thank you, Valentin, for that. And Valentin, thanks for that point, actually, because I think one of the things I've always been very impressed with is the ability of bike riders to be able to get up in the middle of ungodly hours, put on that, to me, ridiculous-looking wetsuit or full-body neoprene suit, get on a bike, go off in the middle of a rain, and come back and say how they loved it. I think getting out of that, which leads me to my first question, and I'll address it to Shahrukh, is how would someone who's used to delivering, but at the same time being given clear instructions and directions and so on and so forth, how do we encourage ourselves to get out of a comfort zone and put ourselves out there to become more core to the organization, to the team, and be able to actually take more responsibility, Shahrukh?
Yeah. So Samir, taking responsibility is a whole big subject by itself. But I think before I jump into answering what one does to sort of take responsibility and really make a difference to what one is going to do in an organization or does in an organization, whether it be large or small, tech, new tech, old tech, whatever, I think there are a few table stakes or conditions precedent which I often feel are very important. So for example, you give the biking example. Now, if you tell me that I'm going to do what I see bikers do, forget it. I am not going to sign up for that. But on the other hand, when I bring it to the organization and leadership and sort of our own personal management, I think there are certain conditions precedent, or what I call table stakes, which are very important before I can just put up my hand and say, "Hey, I want to make a difference." So let me first talk a little bit on that. I think first and foremost, what has been key, and this is again holds true of large organizations I've worked in, on the small company boards that I sit in now, or on my advisory work that I do for not-for-profits or for small organizations. So the first thing and the most important thing I think is about really being clear about my purpose, and that's why I can't be a biker. Right? I have my stationary bike, which is about as far as I'll go. The purpose, why am I here? What do I really want to achieve? What are my values that I want to bring to this organization, to this job, to this role, to this career? And again, having a personal vision, I think, is the most important thing. Because without that, I can't be something that I really want to be and add value to. So I think that's the first piece, the whole purpose, values, and my vision and my personal vision. The second and the most important quality I think we need as a table stakes before we can make a difference to organizations is being genuine and authentic. There is a lot that I have seen in my corporate career, in my current work, where I see a lot of fake behavior, which eventually gets caught out because it doesn't solve the human problems, or it doesn't solve business problems, or worse still, doesn't grow the business. So being genuine and authentic, what you see is what you get, I think is so critical. And again, it's about wanting to make a difference and really wanting to see a desire to influence and make a difference to what you're doing. That's another table stake. Understanding and acceptance, I think, is another very important quality, because you just can't start changing things. When I joined Shell, I questioned everything because I just couldn't get my head around why the devil were we doing certain things in a way that we were. But when I started listening and understanding and accepting, there is some logic here. So I knew what I could challenge, what envelopes I could push, and what I couldn't. That's important. Having a growth mindset, I think that's another one, which is very important table stake, because I often I have seen very selfish behaviors in organizations, whether it be a startup or whether it be a $2 trillion cap company, where behaviors of people, they don't see it as a growth mindset. There's enough for everyone to go around. There's enough to go after in terms of business. And the last table stake I just want to highlight is collaboration and relationship. It's everything. I can't, even if I want to change something and I take off on a flyer, there's only that much I can fly alone unless I carry the rest of the troops along with me. So these are the 5 key table stakes that I feel very passionately about, and I've always coached all my mentees in all parts of the world to do that. So then, to answer your question, what does it take to take that responsibility? First of all, clearly taking the lead. I think in some cultures, particularly the Asian culture, I have seen in certain Latin American or European cultures, I have seen in my global experience that some people find it very easy to take the lead culturally. Some cultures don't. So I think putting our cultures behind, putting what we stand for behind. If we've got that table stake, that launching pad, I think putting our hands up, taking initiative, like taking on extra project work, putting your hands up for more, taking that little international assignment, whatever way, shape, or form that might take. You talked about performance. I think being achievement and performance driven is very important, because unless we really make a difference quarter by quarter, AOP by AOP, strategic plan by strategic plan, we can't really make progress. Speaking up, very similar to putting your hand. And lastly, I think not being too disappointed by being knocked back. Valentin just talked about the bike crash he had. And we will all fall. We will have downs. But I think being adaptable and saying, okay, I take it on the chin, but I'm going to be positive and I'm going to be resilient, which is exactly when my bike crashes and I can't walk. How do I pick myself up in a lonely place and get going again with my life? So I think these are some of the key elements that I would talk to Samir.
Thank you, Shahrukh. So Shahrukh mentioned being purpose-driven, genuine and authentic, the need to make a difference or the interest in making a difference, to understand and to listen, a growth mindset. And along with that, I think comes the ability to take risk or the interest in taking risk and being able to be resilient. And the final one being collaboration. So Valentin, on these, I think in terms of being genuine and authentic, that's a core value proposition in terms of having your not just morality but your ethics and your North Star correct, and understanding and listening is a whole sector in itself. In terms of being purpose driven, right? So how do we, of course, as the founder, we have that mindset saying that, look, the purpose is clear to me. I know where I need to go. The ups and downs are fine. We've had this conversation. Ben and I have had this conversation actually. Hi, Ben. I just saw you there. But Ben and I have had this conversation before. How do you get people who are joining you later on, people who might not have the same initial vision of the company that you have, to then sort of drink the Gatorade, if you will? But how do you do that? And you brought on a partner after you started the business, so you might have a good insight on this.
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, I believe it also comes back to, even before that, what you want in people that you're looking for. So I think like the big underlying topics that Shahrukh mentioned, like attitude, curiosity, because you want someone who's willing to learn and open-minded with maybe this growth mindset. Being able, you see in them like the potential to be confident if you give them the right keys and communicate with them clearly, that they have some certain level of self-awareness. And I think those are underlying necessities before you even hire someone that can have a match with the company or with the organization and be able to onboard them correctly. Then when it comes to actually onboarding someone, and in my case, so it's a bit special because I knew the person beforehand, the partner, and I knew what they were bringing to the table in terms of skills, in terms of complementarity with my skills today, and also the needs of the organization. And I think replacing physical interaction is still very, very complicated. There's a necessity to kind of build that relationship and energy that will be building between the people of a company that is crucial, and that can only be done physically. But it comes down to what, if you onboard someone remotely, it comes down to the most important thing in any organization in the world, and also to something you mentioned in terms of honesty. It's about communication. Giving the right environment for someone to develop in starts with communication. Who's in charge of what are the resources you have, what freedom are you given, what is expected in the longer term for the organization, the vision of the group as an organization, the objectives, everything. If you are clear from the start what you're aiming at, and you're able to give the framework for that to happen, and there's an open communication between the members. So I think honest feedback is something that everyone should learn to give and receive. It's very, very hard. It's sometimes goes against what we want to hear, and we can take it personally, but it's very important to create that rapport of confidence between the people, that they also feel, okay, if I do something completely wrong, I'm going to be told it's completely wrong. But unless I'm being told that, because we're open and we're honest with each other, that believes that I believe they trust me, so I can go ahead and do what I believe works in the vision that I've been given. And by that, you empower your people. I think those are key things that make a difference. But it starts with hiring and figuring out like what your organization needs, the energy that matches with the rest of the organization. And something that we talked a lot when we were working together, Samira, was attitude. Do you have the right attitude when you come to work, when you approach an issue or a problem or a challenge or an opportunity? How do you take it? Are you open-minded? Are you going to be like, okay, I don't know how to do it today, with all the tools that we have online, I can learn it. How will I approach that? And how will I communicate around that? Oh yeah, I don't know, but I can learn. Or oh, I don't know how to do it. It's impossible. I don't want to do it. And those are initial factors you can evaluate somehow when you're hiring people that would already make a difference to onboarding people remotely or physically. But I think it's even more important when you do it remotely.
Thank you, Valentin. So basically, what I heard is that in terms of not driving purpose, but helping someone buy into the purpose and be a part of the overall purpose of the organization or the team, one of the key elements is evaluating them for the right attributes from the beginning, even before they join, or doing it as best as possible. And those key attributes that you have seen would be the attitude, would be curiosity, self-awareness, and the potential to be confident. And then in terms of onboarding itself, it makes it a bit easier if they have the right, if you've known them before, like in your case. But in terms of onboarding, the team or the leader or the manager then needs to make sure that the communication and the environment around that communication is something where people are comfortable communicating, both to their peers, upwards, and to their subordinates or their colleagues. And then clarity on what resources are available to them when they're in the team, and what are the objectives and deliverables. So a clear idea of the vision, objectives and deliverables. And I'm tempted to say tasks because of obvious reasons, but they need to know what the objectives and deliverables are and what are the resources available to them. And finally, giving them the freedom to act and fail so that they feel empowered. So that's what I heard from you. And this is very key, I think, even with not just with obviously with a co-founder, but with colleagues and even with collaborators outside of the organization. And then you touched upon something which, Shahrukh, I'll switch to you and ask you this question is, given that we're now working digitally and we're working remotely, you've been doing this for a while on boards and Valentin and I and all of us have been doing this for a while, but now that we're starting to do this more formally, what are the biggest challenges you foresee that will come in acquiring and developing talent and also retaining talent? And then Valentin, I'll ask you a follow-up on this.
So I think on acquiring and developing and retaining talent, I think the whole bucket really goes, I think, quite together, because you want to acquire and develop the best, but then you also want to keep them, right? So my honest sense is that, yeah, things are changing a lot. There's a lot of debate about how we are going to work going forward. But you know what? I think the fundamental challenges of talent acquisition, development, and retention are not going to be vastly different. Yeah, it's exacerbated because, as Valentin alluded to, we don't have that face-to-face camaraderie, that FaceTime, that in flesh time. Biden and Putin's summit yesterday, they talked about the importance of being face-to-face, and we all know that we struggle with that right now. So, to your question, and I'll go into the sort of more details about the attraction, development, and a bit on retention. It has only gotten worse and more exacerbated now because it's just more challenging to do that. So in terms of the technology of talent acquisition, yeah, there's a lot of things happening in the technology space of acquiring talent today. And, some of your companies are invested in that. But I think the non-tech side of it, there is a lot of demand for certain kind of people that we have seen, which is going to get more and more difficult now. And particularly in the digital transformation and digital experience space. Everyone from the funds of the world to every small startup wants that kind of digital skilled person. So that I think is getting more and more challenging as to how we get those people on board. And particularly in these times when people can't come across for interviews, they can't move countries, and then authorities to work are getting more difficult. Singapore is one prime example. On the development side, again, I don't think it would be much easier to have classroom training, but you know what? Classroom training is almost dead. All development takes place on the job, or at least 90% of it. The 70-20-10 principle, which is a more sort of later spin on the 90 and 10, is 70% is on the job through stretch assignments, how we create a job package that really makes great fun for the individuals. And the 20 is the coaching and the mentoring and the open feedback and honesty communication space that Valentin referred to. So that's the 20, and the 10 is the classroom training. Now that's already been replaced over the last decade with online learning anyway, but there's no substitute again for a little bit of face-to-face mix with that, because that's where the real learning also takes place, not just from some software which is downloaded 12 million pages and so on. And I want to just talk a little bit about retention, because people think retention is about money, but actually retention is really about three fundamental things in my book. One is the values and the ways of working. Yeah, that is, and how we engage our people, through whatever medium we use, open communication, trust, empowerment, enablement, and all of those important things. The second one is the how I help people develop in their careers. Can I offer a career, even if it's a limited time? Can I offer a meaningful career? What kind of personal, professional development? And lastly, on the rewards and recognition. There, I can take it offline with anybody, but there are many non-financial and financial rewards that I think we also have to take. And in this time, it's even more difficult, Samir, to do, because people are not face to face. You can't put an arm around someone and create that sort of feeling of trust, which it's far more difficult to do. The financial side, yes, we can, but the non-financial gets even more exacerbated.
Thank you so much on that. And you mentioned that in terms of the talent acquisition and identification and retention is a key area. So, and one of the areas you mentioned is that stretch assignments, or giving them challenging things to do, or asking your colleagues, basically helping them, giving them space to grow, is 80% of that. And how we engage and work with them and giving them a clarity on their career, even if it's for a limited time, a year, 2 years, so on. And then finally, rewards and recognition, both financial and non-financial, are extremely key. And we've seen this. So when we talk with, I was speaking with the founder of one of our companies, engineering companies, and he said, look, it's not the fact that we can't pay them more. It's the fact that when we talk to these engineers, they say, look, what are the assignments I'll be working on? What are the challenges I'll be facing? What do you offer in terms of software? What is the hardware you work on? And he said, I've never faced these questions before, because people would ask you, how many days off do I get? What money will you pay me? And what's the next role I will get? And he's like, I don't know how to deal with these questions, because we can offer them the best, but we cannot, and Google and all will still give them an ice skating rink and deep mine to work on. So how do I attract and keep these people? And my thought on this was, and I'll ask you about this as well, is that the key is to the key here is that these are the people you want anyway. These are the people who are asking you these questions. Those are the folks you want. And it goes back to that honesty and clear communication that Valentin, you brought up, that makes a difference in identifying people who will be able to work in your ecosystem. The question to you, Valentin, this would be based on what Shahrukh said. As a startup, as a young company, where you have to use other resources outside even your own organization, motivate them to give outcomes for you. How do you then engage them and convince them that what they're working on is exciting and it'll help them develop as individuals, especially online, of course, but also offline? How do you do that?
That's a big question. We haven't really hired anyone yet, but for me, it comes back to what we initially talked about, like sort of purpose. So showing them that there's a bigger you have bigger impact than just making company and potentially making financial gains. You are actually changing the behavior of people or having an impact on that. And I think more and more of, at least my generation, is attracted by that objective or that ideal. So it's about finding those emotional and non-factual things that will make a difference. And I believe it's tricky today. It's still like going back to what Shahrukh mentioned. And I think one of the biggest challenges today is you have access to so many jobs because they don't require you to be, I don't know, in the US, in Singapore, in Switzerland. You can access most jobs from anywhere. So you're competing against more people on both sides. So a talent is competing with more talents to get a job, and a company is competing with more companies to acquire the talent. So they start having more choice, and so they'll be more comfortable asking those questions that Samir mentioned. And first of all, having a benchmark maybe for factual things like salary, holidays, etc., benefits, and then start going into the emotional part. Okay, what is it bringing? What can I say afterwards? And then there's this series on Netflix called Startups right now. If some people have time, one of the key characters is from Little Haiti in Miami, and his wife tells him, "Look, you can decide if you go further with the startup. Either you stay like, I don't remember his name, Raymond the Thug, or you become Raymond the Entrepreneur." And he's kind of driven by, oh, I want to change how people perceive me and make a difference to the world. And I'm picking the entrepreneur path, although it's not bringing the same thing to my life, and I'm distancing from my friends and everything. And I think it comes back to this: how will you change? How will you attract people by touching these emotional points that will go beyond just the financial gain, and telling them, look, we're driving, I don't know, the Sustainable Development Goal number 11, making smart cities a reality. You're going to be confronted with governments and everything. And it goes back to rewards and exposure. And I think you mentioned also recognition, by giving them, maybe not titles, but exposure and responsibilities and the possibility to be very quickly engaged with very important or somehow important stakeholders that they value. It might not be president of a country, but it might be that CTO from Google, and you'll speak with him because we're working on developing a tool with them, and that might attract them differently because they have a different rapport with people that they might, even if they work at Google, might have no possibility to speak with. And one thing I discovered, and I wish I discovered earlier as well when I was at August 1 and PXL, I think when you're an entrepreneur and when you're working in a startup or early stage startup, or when you're working in a venture capital or linked to startups, those are the few roles where you can contact anyone you would like to, because you always have a reason to speak with them. You always have a topic that you can share or exchange, be it like learning from them, be it understanding what their problems are, be it reaching out for advice, being a potential customer, or on both ends. So there's always a reason to contact these people. And I think also selling these unique selling points that you might not have at, let's say, a consulting company where you're very much limited in terms of who you can communicate with, or a banking role where you probably you can't invest or can't like look at other financial instruments. Then those things you have to kind of figure out, okay, that person, that's what they hesitate with, and they're thinking of these 5 industries to go into. What can I bring that the others won't? That will be more than just salary, holidays, benefits.
Thank you for that. So basically, what I hear is that in addition to the tangible, the intangibles need to be made clearer to the person that you're speaking with, whether you're trying to bring them onto the team or you're trying to retain them or train them and grow them in the team. And an additional point you mentioned is the privileged advantage of someone being an entrepreneur or someone being in a buy side, we call it in the old days, on the buy side of the equation versus the sell side of the equation, where you have privileged access. And being able to take that privileged access and then develop that is something that is attractive to folks who would have a Linchpin mindset or an owner mindset. So making that clear to them that you have that opportunity. Now, actually, there's a quick follow-up before we go to the next round of questions. Is Valentin, you've had the opportunity to recruit as well as seen a person complete their tenure all online, and at least I know twice that you've done that. And we've had different experiences with both those candidates. And without going into detail, What would you say when an entrepreneur here is hiring someone online and helping develop, will help them find, because you mentioned attributes in the beginning, evaluation of that is very important. What are some things that they could do to make sure that the people they bring on board online will actually be the people that they need in their team and who will take ownership and develop? Whether it's direct or indirect, like, you know how I always ask, are you a reader? That there might be other attributes you've seen.
I have to think through it, but it starts with having a clear process, obviously, and having like similar questions for everyone, very much open questions. So you see like how much they're willing to share and want to share on different topics, and digging into what they've done that also has a link to your company. So like the what your strengths and weaknesses is usually not very important, but how you behave in certain settings. For example, we talked about communication. So if you have someone who you ask them the question, okay, what did you do last time you failed something at a company, or you missed a target in your objectives? And if they tell you straight away, yeah, we talked with my supervisor, we tried to figure out something else. That means they're very open to communicating on their failures. Some might say, okay, I learned from my mistake and I just did it, and hands down, you can ask them like, oh, did you communicate with someone? And they might say I had to, and that might be like, a yellow flag. And I think recruiting is not only about like pointing out all the red flags, but finding the green flags. Like, what are the attributes that are bringing value to you and your company? In terms of specific questions, obviously, like reader and reading and being interested by, I don't know, newsletters, or even now series and videos on YouTube or TikTok, you can learn a lot from that. There must be a way to kind of assess curiosity, which is a key for me in general in life, is a key attribute for someone, because it shows that they're willing to learn anything, or at least reach out to the information and say, okay, this is what it is. It's way too complicated because it's development, but at least now I know what it is, and I can speak with a tech person and tell them, look, I've read about this, I don't understand anything, can you tell me more? Is it possible for me to learn? And that curiosity is a key element. So finding questions that will make that pop out. And when I was at PXL, we had a workshop on games, and how games are a good way to evaluate people, how they play together or against each other, when they're under duress or stress, how they behave. Those kind of different paths to interviewing can provide you much more information if you take the time to assess them clearly, and requires, again, like a process and a clear benchmark or evaluation sheet that you're able to fill in. And also the importance of having multiple people there, because we're unconsciously biased when we interview someone, be it that we did the same, have similar education, come from the same country, even are from the same ethnicity, or have friends in common, can be anything. So I think, yeah, finding unconventional ways of getting that information through games, through question like, what do you read, or even giving them certain tasks that are linked to doing some research, can be linked to you can look at their like sports. I think is a very good benchmark, because it shows it requires like discipline. If you're competing, it requires discipline, organization, resilience. If you're competing in a team sports, then it also requires communication and adapting to a group and accepting defeat as well. In general sports, you have to accept that you're not the best unless you are, and then you're lucky. Well, you're not lucky if you put in the hard work. So yeah, I think it depends what you're looking for, but finding those questions, and it might take time, and might take iterations. Find those questions or approaches that are that enable you to find the information you're looking for.
Thank you, Valentin. I think you mentioned curiosity. You mentioned having a clear process of evaluation and having multiple people look, because there are biases that all of us have that we might not be self-aware of. To eliminate those biases. And then something you mentioned, which was very, very profound, is not just looking for red flags, but also looking for green flags. Because instead of trying to eliminate, we need to see, okay, what will make this person a key to us and a linchpin in our organization. So looking for green flags is very, very important. Finally, looking at, in terms of methodology, in terms of actual tasks, looking at proxy methods of identifying certain attributes and skill sets, which is certainly sports and games, where you see how they deal with competition, and very importantly, how they deal with defeat, and can they play nice? Can they play well together? So on that point, actually, Shahrukh, my question to you would be, of course, if there's anything additional you want to add to this, but obviously in organizations, there are always setbacks and there are conflicts. And especially when we are dealing with situations where you have a lot of responsibility and it's a flat organization. What role does self-discipline play, if any, and any other aspects that we need to be aware of in terms of someone being successful and being able to play nice, but also deal with defeat and deal with setbacks?
Yeah, I think self-discipline is important, but there are so many other ingredients around self-discipline that is also equally important. And being self discipline, I think, helps you to build your emotional, mental, and physical well-being. I think that is so important in an organization. You don't want somebody to come and burn out. You read more and more about mental health issues now, and it's not new. I've handled tens of serious senior level mental health issues, spouse issues with mental health, and so on. But having that self-discipline helps you to stay strong overall well-being, not just the mental, but also physical and emotional. I think it also enables somebody to keep going because you want a corporate athlete. You don't want somebody who's going to be in it for the sprint and then burn out at the end of the 80 meters. You want someone who can space him or herself out. So it's really a marathon and not a sprint. So constantly coaching yourself and telling yourself that, look, there are things that I need to do for myself so that I can do more for others, for the organization, I think is also part of that whole self-discipline piece, if you like. And again, being a linchpin is about sustainability and being a sustainable contributor. You don't want a meteor and who just burns out and then it's end of the game, and you can't get the value out of that person for the long haul. And I think lastly, I think self-discipline leads to resilience, which is what also was alluded to by Valentin. I think it's very important. Resilience, we've done tens of workshops on resilience. It's a much undervalued value today because, again, you can't be resilient if you're not self-disciplined. You can't be lack objectivity and then you try to be self-disciplined. It's very, very difficult. So that resilience that you develop through self-discipline is very important. We will all be down. We will all be down and out for a while sometimes, but it's how the ability to lift oneself up each time, and that's where you need self-discipline. I think research in the mental well-being space has shown that if someone really, even with a serious chemical or whatever mental imbalance, can really pull him or herself up from the bootstraps if there is serious self-introspection and discipline to lift oneself up slowly but surely. So yeah, significantly important, and it leads to sustainability, resilience, and also basically just carrying on and continuing to give ourselves the best that we can for the long time.
Thanks. Valentin, any points from you on that in terms of dealing with setbacks, whether as a founder or as a team member, and what really helps?
I think Shahrukh said a lot about it. Also linked to like self-awareness. I think acceptance in terms of failure in general, accepting failure and accepting setbacks is one part of it, and how you approach them, be it because you are self-disciplined or because you have now a process and you've seen setbacks come and go. And okay, this is what happened. Let me reflect on it. Let's look at it from this perspective. Let me ask the stakeholders also their perspective and write it somewhere so it doesn't happen again. I think sometimes also seeing setbacks as is not seeing setbacks as setbacks. It's seeing them as, okay, this is part of the journey. It continues. It's not the end of the world. And I'll take another like reference to kind of sports and health. But there's this big thing about dieting that when you go off the diet, it's over. And people crack and they say, okay, it's over. I don't want to say a bad word. I messed up my program, so it's not worth continuing. And I think that mindset is the problem. By saying, okay, it's just one little rock on the road, the road continues, I can still go forward. That's the mentality you should have beyond self-discipline. It's seeing the longer term objective, vision, longer journey that will take you to go there. For setbacks, for conflicts, it's, for me, that's a rough subject because it can involve emotions or it can involve different things that are not linked to who you truly are. And sometimes hard to get back to or be able to erase from memories.
That's really helpful, and I think it gives us quite a holistic view in terms of, as a leader or as a team leader and a team member, what are the different attributes that are required to take an owner mindset and to be a linchpin, as it were. I will now open up the forum to questions. If anyone has a question, please let me know and acknowledge you, and we will unmute your mic.
Hi, Valentin. Good to see you again. I want to ask you a question. How and why did you decide to bring in this person as your co-founder, as you mentioned earlier? What brought you to bring this person on, and how did you identify him or her as
the
the potential co?
So there'll never be a perfect match. Maybe first want to say that, because I think that's something like I try to achieve that as well. And it's either you spend, I mean, it's good to spend time on finding the right person, but you may spend too much time and not be focusing on actually making a business. But concerning my case specifically, so a little bit of a complicated story, but I started with someone else and that wasn't working out for multiple reasons, but mostly because we didn't have the same vision of how the project was going to grow through time. And so I found myself on my own, and I wanted to work with someone else because it just gives you accountability. It's already hard enough to build a company if you're a team, but if you're on your own, finding the motivation to make things happen and move fast is rough, and setbacks hurt you a lot. And you have no one to turn to bring back some energy. You're just on your own, and rethinking all the questions and okay, is it worth continuing? And you can stop believing very quickly on where you're going. Then for me, it was about like finding what skills do I miss to make this thing happen. So initially, I had a list of, I don't know, 50 skills. I have like tech, I want this, I want to implement this, but I have no idea how to do it, or I don't understand how I alone can make it happen, or I'm better at doing this. So it would be great if I find someone to cover these topics. For example, operations, like someone to set up a whole ecosystem internally so I can focus on sales, for example. That was a big thing. And using that kind of initial framework, I looked at the people that I knew that had skills that would fulfill certain aspects of it. And then obviously, like, knowing the person from beforehand is a bit different because we have a relationship, we know each other. We're not too close, which I think is also important. We're not the best friends in the world, so it won't have a negative impact on that. But we already have a friendly relationship that we know each other in a setting that is different from work. So there was this base layer of we know each other's emotion to a certain extent. And then she is my co-founder. She's a woman. And she was matching a lot of the criteria that I was looking for. She had previous experience in entrepreneurship. She has digital expertise. Of course, at the time in my mind, it had to be a CTO, but she had that tech knowledge that she could speak with tech people and understand them, maybe not develop a program or platform, but be able to communicate with external developers and make sure that they don't rip us off. So you kind of find compromises here and there. What was important is that we had a common vision. Where we want to go, both of us, in 5-10 years as individuals. Where do we see the company going? How do we want to be attached to a company? So is it the baby that you don't want to give up for the next 100 years? Or is it more of a challenge slash, like right now, a project that you're working on that you would see working on 5 years, but then you're attracted by so many other things that you want to go into? And then there was a big match on how we approach work. So we did a testing. So we did, like, for 4 months, we worked together without her being in the company. So she gave like 40% of her time to the company, and the reward was that she would become a co-founder and get shares of the company. Yeah, I also took the approach of, and I think this is also a requirement when you start alone, to be perfectly fine with saying, okay, I don't need 100% of a company. I don't mind at all. I'm fine with having half of it. As long as it goes somewhere. And I'm way more than happy to have 10% of or even 5% of $1 billion company than having 100% of something that doesn't work out. And I think that was also, like, being open about this was important. And then during the test that we did together, we set clear objectives, roles, how we wanted to communicate. And we're doing every 4 weeks, we have an open feedback session. That's also why I mentioned it, because it's something I really never thought about it. And the first time you do it, you're a bit scared of what you want to say because you're afraid it's going to hurt the other person, and you don't want it to be a bad relationship from the start. But actually, being open from the start avoids, like, bigger conflicts to happen in the future. And if all the people involved are taking that approach to be open-minded and say, okay, I'm taking it, how can I improve? Then it's a match and it works out. And I think for my case and for our case as Offsite, that's a little bit what happened. We're like, okay, we both have complementary skills. So on the again, factual side, we're good. Emotional side, we knew each other from before. We knew like, okay, what's happening in your life. We also talked for quite a while about where you see yourself in 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, 20 years, how you want your life to be. Are there other projects you want to pursue on the side? How you want to be involved in the company, why you want to do this. We talked about purpose and everything, and sometimes people just want to do it for financial reasons, and maybe that's good as well. And then doing a test, I think, is for a co-founder, I think doing a test run for, if you don't know them for longer, but if for us, like 3 months was a good time, was enough to also go through ups and downs. So being rejected from competitions to having our first platform reach out to us saying, I want to be on the platform, tell me how I can do it, come visit my space. We had these moments where you see how we both celebrate it and how we also both cope with setbacks. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
Keith, you had a question?
So I have a question to the panelists in general, maybe a bit more to Shahrukh. So how do you do performance management for creative work or non-repetitive work? Because in this case, it's very hard to define your KPIs, and your job nature might change every half a year. This is especially the case for startups or when you are setting up a new vertical.
So clearly, I think that performance management is not something that is done over a 12-month period. So clearly, I understand that having clear KPIs becomes more easy in a more established setup. But I think that there's always the ability to tweak key KPIs and have them revised every quarter even. Why you could do it every month. I'm not a big fan of real-time appraisal systems. Yeah, those are all valuable inputs. But at the end of the day, why do you have performance management? Because you want to get somewhere. You've got clear goals and targets. And unless you divvy that up with your team, you can't really get there. So it's very important, even if you have to revise those targets in a startup, in a digital tech startup or any startup, there is the ability to keep revisiting that, as long as you don't do it too often. Very often I hear in startups why people leave is that there's complete confusion. I was asked to work down this path, and then day after tomorrow I'm told to work down this path, and I just can't take it. It's not me. So as long as you have some stickiness, even like 60 days, 90 days, and have clear plans over those areas, I think that should suffice.
Okay, thank you.
Great. That brings us to the end of this session. I really appreciate the questions as well as the comments that both Shahrukh and Valentin have made. I think we went into it in quite a deep and broad manner, which is actually really helpful. I think the conversation is really something that founders need to continue having with their co-founders, with their team, and really reflecting on themselves. And I would be amiss if I didn't recommend a few books at this stage. So one of the books that I would recommend, referring to what Shahrukh and Valentin both mentioned, is a book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. So it's about the kind of mindset that the person has that helps you in sort of taking advantage of opportunities and also creating opportunities of your own. The second one is called Linchpin, which is aptly named by Seth Godin. Third one is The Dip by Godin, which also talks a little bit upon when you need to know when to let go and when do you know you need to keep going, because you're almost at the end of the tunnel. And then the final one that I highly recommend is a book I read recently called Humankind. It's by Rutger Bregman. He also wrote Utopia for Realists. And it's a very exciting book. It's about how human beings are fundamentally good and they want to do the right thing. And what are the different things that motivate them to do the right things and work towards goals that are larger than themselves. Because a lot of times we tend to think we can multitask and we have foresight, but we really don't. We have a limited amount of time that we can think towards. And how do we actually think larger than that? And how do we motivate our teams and our communities and our families even to think about something from a fundamental a point of kindness and of wanting to achieve something larger. So Humankind is another book.
Thanks for this opportunity. And if there's any interest to check in on any of the points that I made or any way I can help in terms of the items that we talked about today, I'd be happy to help offline. Yeah?
Thank you.
Likewise, happy to help offline as well if you have any topics you want to dive a bit deeper into, although limited experience. Thanks a lot for having me. I also would like to recommend just one book because I think it's also interesting. It's about company culture, and it's called The No Rules Rules, and it's by the CEO of Netflix, Reed Hastings. And it's about company culture, so I think it's also interesting because it's a base layer for the people you have in the organization you have and the energy you have and everything. So I thought it was I hope it was insightful for everyone, and yeah, feel free to reach out. Email and everything to follow up with any topics. Happy to go into them.
Perfect. Thank you everyone for your time this morning, and I will see all of you soon. Again, thanks Valentin and Shahrukh, and thanks Raghav and the team for putting this together. Take care, everyone.